when you intend to cover up a spot, or you tend to cover up some hairlines, you get into a gray area. Now, the grading services have done a damn good job, in my opinion, of weeding out the excessive makeup, let's say. But the moving of metal and adding heads and cutting bands and adding a mint mark are irreparable. You can't add metal back. You can't fix that head. You can't change the bands. But you can.
The bands that were never there in the first place. The head on a standing Liberty quarter that was never there in the first place.
But you can remove that makeup. All right? So this is the gray area that I think we have gotten into and we've wandered into, and it's inappropriate to continue the topic and have it bandied about and talked about constantly, because the grading services then are the ones who make the decision on what's acceptable and what isn't, because we back it up. And it's repairable. It's something that you can remove. So even though you say there's a fingerprint in the smudge.
Well, here, I completely disagree with you.
Okay, that's fine.
So, but I won't let you
When
continue.
you say you can see a fingerprint, I can tell you that sometimes a fingerprint happens in a natural
Some it's
film.
an accidental, but when it's always over a mark, that's a question. Well, here's the thing we can't replace. We can't take the prior 55S half and make it toned again. We can't take the Bass large size 1829 half eagle and put the original color back on. We can't take the 1810, the best one out of Pittman, and put the color back. So changes are being made in an effort to increase the value, which are irreparable. So we are.
You're making general statements about a few.
No, I'm making specific statements.
Okay, but you're saying things that are, definitive. For the most part, conservation.
Is it okay to conserve every mat-proof gold coin? This is not the place to get an argument. But
no, but see, you're making these definitive statements, every one.
Right.
And you're making, I think you're going into this assumption that, like, NCS conserved every mat-proof gold coin out there. And if you think that coins weren't dipped 40 years ago, then you're not being.
Well, I know that they've been dipped 40 years ago, but we're talking about things that have been happening recently when we have supposedly more knowledge, and they are done in an effort to increase the value. I mean, my feeling is this: it comes back to an ethical model. There's a couple of different ethical models in business. One is business ethics that are like poker ethics, where cheating is acceptable, bluffing is acceptable. And that's a perfectly acceptable model. And the other one is personal ethics, where lying and cheating is not acceptable. And I think in this business, it's a matter of sometimes we fail to know what model we're using. And if we use a model where we do anything that's legal, and we only say that moving metal is a problem, but adding toning or being deceptive by re-adding PVC, which is being done, or adding waxes and things of that nature, or clear shoe polish, or pine tar to tone buffalo nickels or whatever, or fixing these, that's something that we can reverse. We can't reverse a lot of those.
Well, I said
we can't get those points back to where they were before.
I said the intent
right.
is clearly coin doctrine.
Right.
Yeah. I don't.
What if you did that, Joe, and then told the buyer that you did it?
Well, here's the problem. The disclosure is the issue.
Yeah, that's
so
my point.
It's your property. To me, I've told David, we've had this discussion, I think they made a mistake in the way that they approached this, in that they attacked the act of coin doctoring. Coin doctoring is not illegal.
Right.
You can do whatever you want if it's your property. The problem is that the fraud, when you then go re-enter the marketplace and don't disclose what's been done.
Or when you submit it to a grading service.
Yeah. Right.
Well, that's a contractual issue. That's a contractual issue.
Joe, I agree with 99% of what you say, and I'm not so sure that Mark doesn't agree too. I think he does. Adding putty, okay? I don't believe that Mark thinks it's okay to put Bondo on a coin.
But those things are not reversible in a way where you get back to the original coin. You end up with something different.
No, I don't think it's okay, and I don't think
but
Mark
when you're talking
thinks
about
it's
things
okay
like, so
either.
I'm looking at things like if you're talking about an $81 dollar, who cares? But if you're talking about the only mint safe 2410 It matters. If you're talking about the only Gem 55 SF, it matters.
I agree with
If
you.
you're talking about a Gem.
I agree with you.
But Joe, I think you make a point too, but how many of us in this room have ever bought a coin from someone, either collector or dealer, where they've said, I just puttied this coin to make it look better, do you want to buy it?
Well, that's the problem.
Now, that would not be deception.
Right.
And the question I have for Bob and Mark, because I know you both collect art, when you buy a piece of art that, as you say, has some, adjustments,
Right.
did the seller tell you that they were?
Never. But what
Well,
you
you
can
get
do
a
is you can
condition
go and you
report
can look at it, you
sometimes.
can get your own experts
Right.
to evaluate it and say, these are the enhancements that have been made.
So it's a buyer
and then
beware?
You only you make your own judgment on whether these things enhance the enhance the painting without destroying
Right.
the initial intent, or whether there was some deception to change it into a different painting by different.
But would the
different,
dealer tell you that? Would the dealer tell you this has been touched up here, here, and here?
Actually, there's very, when in the painting world,
Yeah.
like I collect Chinese paintings. 10 years ago, 80% of Chinese paintings going in auctions were forgeries. The Christie's would never say anything about, they'd say, these are the painters. They would never say anything about that they were forgeries. And yet I'd have an expert that said, all of these are forgeries. It was buyer beware. And so it's interesting that there are other areas where the kind of credibility that you try and apply to coins doesn't exist in other areas.
The difference, Bob, is that the market could correct itself before. So prior to PCGS and NGC, there was a lot of overgrading. But let's say you had this Manhattan proof that was only proof at a stack sale. And it came out and somebody bought it as a proof. And it would go into some other sale and somebody could say it's not a proof. And it would be adjusted to whatever it really was. Or a coin that was advertised as a mint state and was really AU. So it gets sold as a mint state coin, re-enter the market years later, and be appropriately named in AU. Now we lock those numbers in. The market is not allowed to correct. So what we end up with a pool of coins where they're really at their worst possible grade. So that proof that's a mistake is always a proof, unless the grading services decide, and it's their judgment, to change that and to pay for it.
But over time, don't the prices of the coins
They do.
adjust to all of
They
this
do
reality?
adjust.
And
And the thing
that is much of the
I mean,
problem.
like the 1829.5 that just sold, right?
Right.
There's some disagreement about whether that's a proof or not. There's
Right.
over history.
I don't think it's a proof.
If it was absolutely convinced everybody that it's a proof, it wouldn't have sold for 1.4 million. It was sold for a lot more.
Right.
Instead, it sold somewhere in the
It
middle
sold
of.
for exactly
it's
what I
sort of
thought it would work.
maybe it's a proof, maybe it's not,
see,
and so it's right in the
but-
middle.
but-
So it seems that as if efficient markets priced it where it should be. It's sort
Well,
of, or
the
I
one
thought it
thing-
was too high, but it's sort of from.
The one
Yeah.
thing that, so you have an extreme, we'll call him Joe, and then you have, you have
That's
reality.
not the worst thing I've been called.
And then you have,